Earlier this morning, around 8:30, news broke that the FBI had made an arrest in the January 6th pipe bomb story. And we have a name now. We have footage of the home being raided in Northern Virginia of where this suspect lived. And we also have a blistering truth bomb dropped by Rick Grinnell, on the former FBI director, Christopher Wray. Let's first start, though, with the latest, and that is a name of a suspect. The New York Post has the headline here. The suspect's name is Brian Cole, lives in Northern Virginia, the city of Woodbridge. Woodbridge, Virginia is about, I would say, 15 to 20 miles south of Washington, D.C., down I-95, about halfway between the Pentagon and the Quantico Marine Corps military base. It's a big suburb of Northern Virginia. It's in, I think that's Prince William County, Virginia. The suspect was arrested this morning. He is suspected to be that shadowy figure that we have all seen by now, the hooded figure with those very distinctive tennis shoes, placing what was purported to be a pipe bomb in front of the Republican and Democrat National Committee headquarters the morning of the January 6th, or really technically the night before, in the morning of the January 6th riots on Capitol Hill. He was arrested by the FBI this morning in connection to what they're calling an attempted bombing. This is just short of the 5th anniversary of that bombing. And let's now show you here quickly this latest footage that we got. This was overhead in Woodbridge, Virginia. This was the FBI in this cul-de-sac raiding the home that Brian Cole lived in.
Helicopter right here. This is a very heavy police presence at the home of the suspect they have identified in the DC pipe bomb probe. So this is a live look from the Fox 5 DC helicopter. As you see in a cul-de-sac, the FBI now at the home of this suspect. And we were learning more earlier as we were hearing from the FBI after they announced that they made an arrest in the nearly 5-year-old investigation into who placed pipe bombs in Washington, D.C. before the January 6, 2021 riot at the U.S. Capitol. This arrest marks the first time investigators have settled on a suspect in an act that has had a long investigation by law enforcement and also led to some conspiracy theories. Those pipe bombs were placed on January 5th, 2021 near the offices of the helicopter.
Yeah, I love how they just throw out, led to some conspiracy theories. Why don't you tell us what you're talking about exactly? And let's not forget, in the news cycle that we're living in right now with the anonymous leaks that go out about the Trump administration and Republicans and MAGA, last year's or 5 years ago or last decade's conspiracy theory is today's gospel truth. That's typical of the way this story has been covered. And yes, we are learning more and more about this suspect. We've got Julie Kelly, a friend of this program and a friend of this guy, actually, appearing with Steve Bannon earlier this morning. We'll show you what she knows about this and what she's hearing. But I want to pick up on one thread here that you just heard in that report, and that was that this was nearly 5 years ago. We're now coming up, what's today? The 4th of December. So 1 month from this week will be the 5-year anniversary of this incident. We've had over 1,000 arrests of people who walked through doors that were held open for them by Capitol Police in January 6. Grandmas, aunts, uncles, benign, innocent people. Some people committed some bad acts on January 6th. They were arrested, absolutely. But the overkill, the billions of dollars, or at the very least hundreds of millions of dollars, used by the U.S. Attorney's Office, the DOJ, and the FBI to hunt down people and break down their doors in the middle of the night, to raid their homes, to ruin their lives, to hold them without hearings, all surrounding the January 6th demonstrations in the Capitol. The kind of surveillance video that was used to forensically figure out exactly who was there that day, even people who didn't enter the building. The Biden administration and Merrick Garland's Justice Department and Christopher Wray's FBI went after people who were outside the building but were on the grounds of the Capitol. They found people that had scarves because it was pretty cold that day in Washington, D.C. They had scarves around their faces, but they were able to identify them by their eyes, by their ears, by their gait, the way they walked, they all got arrested. But the January 6th pipe bomber, Christopher Wray, was like, well, I don't know. We got no idea. We have no way to figure it out. You know, because of things like that, that's how conspiracy theories are born. And Rick Grinnell, the president of the Kennedy Center, former ambassador to Germany and former acting director of national intelligence, he made a rather keen observation this morning after this address. He said Chris Wray, the former FBI director, clearly didn't care about the pipe bomber. Truly pathetic. And then he added, thank you, Kash, the current director of the FBI, Kash Patel. And clearly, based on this behavior from Christopher Wray and the FBI, that's a pretty easy conclusion to reach. And so the question is, why? Why would Biden's administration, Merrick Garland's Justice Department, and Christopher Wray's FBI move heaven and earth to lock up grandma, who was wearing a MAGA hat that day, walking through a door held open by a Capitol Police officer, and arrest them and treat them like an anarchist and insurrectionist, and yet a guy who was purportedly planning an explosive device outside the RNC and DNC headquarters, not really a priority. Why? Good question. Well, maybe the answer is embedded in this MS Now report of all reports. Yeah, MS Now on the case during Morning Joe. Take a listen to some of the things that Ken Dilanian, who lives and dies off anonymous leaks from the deep state, what he says about what they're learning about this Brian Cole of Woodbridge, Virginia.
Good morning, Jonathan. That's right. The FBI fanned out this morning and made this arrest at the suspect's home, as we understand it. And the suspect is a male. We don't have a name yet, but there is a sealed complaint charging this suspect with placing those two bombs in the hours before the January 6th riots. But authorities are telling us they don't understand or have a motive. They do, though, have some information connecting this suspect to anarchist writings. So it's not clear at all that it was connected to the January 6th attacks after all the speculation that perhaps it was intended as a diversion. Remember, these were real devices, two pipe bombs placed outside the Republican and Democratic National Committee headquarters in downtown Washington, D.C. They could have gone off, but luckily they did not. And as you said, this was a massive investigation, one of the biggest in the FBI's history. They sifted through thousands and thousands of pages of records. They tried to compare credit card records for purchases of items that were used to make the bomb with cell phone records of people who were around the site that night. Remember, they had video, but it didn't show a clear facial image. They had a height of the suspect, 5'7" or 5'8". They had a unique shoe, a Nike shoe that was not sold widely that they tried to use to identify the subject. They even issued a $500,000 reward for information leading to arrest, and they had almost no leads. But what's interesting here is that we're told by two sources close to the case that the information used to put together the case against the suspect was sitting in FBI files and was gathered as perhaps in 2021 or 2022. So could have been used to make an arrest a while ago, and they re-examined this case. And that's going to be a partial vindication for Deputy FBI Director Dan Bongino, who has been exhorting the FBI to take another look at the evidence in this case. What it doesn't do, though, is stand up the bizarre theories that Bongino was expounding.
Yeah, okay, we'll let you finish that in a second. But you notice how he can't even let the statement leave his lips before, in the same breath, he says, yeah, but it doesn't excuse some of the crazy conspiracy theories that are. No, let's just pause for a second here. And let's just remind everybody the impact of the pipe bomb story. I don't know about you, but I have a pretty vivid memory of that day. And I have a vivid memory of the intervening days after January 6th. You remember when there were calls for the arrest of Donald Trump for treason and sedition. You remember. I remember. You remember Joe Biden standing in front of the blood-drenched Independence Hall saying that MAGA Republicans were an existential threat to the Constitution. You remember Jack Smith and his out-of-control special prosecutor's investigation, charging Donald Trump with crimes from January 6th. And in the course of the investigation, he spied on the phone records of sitting U.S. senators, their cell phones, as well as their office phones. You remember all of this, right? Of course, by the way, as we continue to hear people like Joe and Mika and Jake Tapper and members of the Democrat Party and members of the media and George Stephanopoulos and everyone refer to January 6th as an insurrection, you will also remember that none of the thousands of people who were arrested for January 6th, including Donald Trump, whose charges were eventually thrown out, but the charges that Jack Smith did bring against Donald Trump, none of them, not one, from Donald Trump all the way down to Grandma who walked through that door held open by a Capitol Police officer, not one of them was actually charged with the crime of insurrection. But that won't stop all of these teleprompter readers from calling it an insurrection. And how did the events of January 6th reach the fevered pitch that led to all of those arrests, all of that behavior, all of that rhetoric, and all of that vitriol? Well, if you remember right, it was the addition of the pipe bomb story that raised the stakes on this case. You see, let's just play along with the story for a second, that this was a MAGA-fueled January 6th right-wing insurrection where they tried to shred the Constitution and have a coup and take over the government to keep Donald Trump in as president for life. That's what they say over on Blue Sky. That's what they say on a regular basis about the events of January 6th. Now, I don't know about you, but I know a lot of people who are MAGA. I know a lot of people who are right-wing conservatives. I know a lot of people who fit the description that Blue Sky and Joe and Mika and Jake Tapper would like to present as your crazy, lunatic, right-wing, MAGA hat wearing, xenophobic, bigoted insurrectionists from January 6th. And most of those people that I know that fit that description, they're pretty well-armed individuals. Am I wrong? You tell me. Most of those people own a firearm or 7. They keep them safely and legally in their gun safe. They utilize them for self-defense and protection, and they exercise their Second Amendment rights in every possible way legally that they can, including hunting, including sport shooting, whatever. None of my business. It's their constitutional right. They got guns. They can do with them what they want as long as they don't break the law. See, and that's the thing. Do you know how many people arrested on January 6th inside the Capitol had guns? None of them. There were a couple of arrests of people associated with January 6th who had guns in their cars. You know why? Because they drove up from, South Carolina for the speech on the Mall. And as they were driving into D.C., they were like, oh, crap, I forgot. We're not supposed to have a gun in D.C. because D.C. isn't America. And so they put their gun in their glove compartment or in their trunk and hope for the best. And then after they were arrested, unarmed in the Capitol, the cops found their car, recovered it, and then there was a firearm. And I think there were like 4 people like that. My point is, if January 6th was a hate-filled, bigoted, racist, anarchist, MAGA insurrection to overthrow the government, it was the weakest of all sauces because all those people who own guns left them at home. I mean, if they really wanted to take over the government and overthrow things, they'd be like Antifa and bring weapons to the table. And see, the left and the Democrats and the media knew that. And that's why the pipe bomb story was huge. It was everywhere. That's all you heard. They gave you images of January 6th. They showed you the worst of the worst and the people going into the Capitol building. They showed the guy with the podium. They showed the guy with the bison horns. And then they said, and there were pipe bombs discovered. You see, these crazy, violent insurrectionists wanted to blow up these buildings and the innocent people inside. That's why the pipe bomb story was so huge. And that's why it was always so curious that they never found a suspect. And now we're learning from Ken Dilanian here that they had most of the evidence they needed to arrest this guy. It was sitting in files at the FBI, and they never did anything. And it took Kash Patel and Dan Bongino to go in there and say, could we look at this story again? And can we take a look at the evidence and maybe find a suspect? And now it appears they have. You see what I'm getting at, right? It's a curious story. Now, there have been some great independent journalists who have followed this story from the beginning and all events associated with January 6th. One of them is the intrepid Julie Kelly. Now, she called into Steve Bannon's War Room show when the story broke about an hour ago. And let's hear what Julie has to say.
This is a huge development that, of course, your audience and all of us have been waiting for. This was an investigation that was very aggressively pursued early on under Chris Wray's FBI. And then we are told towards February, March of 2021, it just went away. And maybe we will find out exactly why, despite troves of evidence, interviews, pursuit of, what this individual on January 5th was wearing, trying to track down where those items were purchased. Then all of a sudden just went stone cold. As you know, Kash and Dan made this a priority. They have devoted new resources, new investigative tools to this cold case. And it appears a man from Virginia, NBC News is reporting his name as Brian Cole, could be tied to Antifa. Another media outlet is reporting, I cannot confirm that independently. However, this appears to be the individual who is seen on that surveillance video from the evening of January 5th, 2021, between 7:30 and 8:30 on Capitol Hill, allegedly planting these really what they were dummy devices outside the headquarters of both the Republican National Committee and the Democratic National
Julie, hang on, Julie. The whole narrative that we've been fed, the whole reason Peter Navarro and Steve Bannon went to prison was that Antifa and these people had nothing to do with J6. This was all Donald Trump, Donald Trump's people. What are you telling me? There may be the guy may be an anarchist and might be, although you haven't confirmed, it might be associated with Antifa, ma'am.
I mean, look, we know that Antifa was there. I have been told for years by J6ers who were on the ground that they saw Antifa. We can see video of people dressed in that black bloc garb who were tied to Antifa. We know that there were confrontations between Antifa and the Proud Boys a few days before, the evening before. Also, we have on film, on recording, undercover, plainclothes DC police officers specifically saying that they were there to look for Antifa. So if this individual, and again, I cannot confirm this with my sources independently, that this is an Antifa type or certainly not a MAGA supporter, this blows a huge hole in the early narrative that someone aligned with Donald Trump and the MAGA movement tried to blow up the headquarters of the RNC and DNC, where Kamala Harris was, don't forget, beginning around 11:30 a.m. on January 6th of 2021. So
there you go. All right. And that's good stuff from Julie Kelly. But let's just revisit this now, this whole idea. And there are a couple of news reports who are using the word Antifa or an Antifa type associated with this suspect who's been named as Brian Cole. And let me bring you back to Ken Dilanian again on Morning Joe and remind you of the language that he used. Take a listen very carefully.
This arrest at the suspect's home, as we understand it, and the suspect is a male. We don't have a name yet, but there is a sealed complaint charging this suspect with placing those two bombs in the hours before the January 6th riots. But authorities are telling us they don't understand or have a motive. They do, though, have some information connecting this suspect to anarchist writings.
All right, anarchist writings. That was the key word there, anarchist writings. So listen, We're going to continue to follow the story. We're not going to be like cable news. We're not going to start assuming and projecting and extrapolating and hypothetically putting out our theories, because you don't come here for theories, not at least about real crimes, maybe political theory about what might happen politically in a story or why it might have happened politically. But I'm not going to waste your time or deceive you with some sort of guesswork about this kind of thing. All right, let's follow the evidence and follow the facts. We certainly have moved further along on this story than we have for the first 4.5 years of the investigation under the Biden regime. But let's just say this. If that is accurate, and it's Ken Dilanian, so it's a bit of a coin flip, but if that's accurate, and if this suspect that they have arrested is in fact guilty, and if anarchist writings is the best description that we have for it right now, well, let's think about it for a second, because I assure you, the media and the left and the Democrats and the establishment, they're going to do whatever they can to keep Antifa out of the mix here. The last thing they want is this suspect of the J6 bombing to be linked as some sort of Antifa type. All right? It's not going to do that. And here's the thing. There's no such thing as a membership card for Antifa, right? There's not going to be a paper trail of him, paying his annual dues for Antifa. It's just not a thing. By the way, you can say the exact same thing about MAGA. There's no such thing as a card-carrying member of MAGA. There's no such thing as paying your annual dues, and now I am a full-fledged member of MAGA. Although the media acts like there is. The Democrats act like there is. I'll leave you with this, though. If this story is true, that this suspect is guilty and has a paper trail of anarchist writing, use your own brain. Use your own logic, use your own reason, and follow the facts here. When you hear somebody is an anarchist, does that sound like somebody who's MAGA adjacent? Or does it sound like someone who's Antifa adjacent? I think we all know the answer.